Twisted spoons and midnight moons. It's the Crane Bag Podcast. Today we're going to find out what happens when all of your sisters get married to birds. Once there was a king, once there was a queen. They ruled wisely and well over their kingdom. And you may ask, must there always be a king? Must there always be a queen? Well, perhaps you are that king, perhaps you are that queen. For a story is an invitation to become every part of that story. The story is a tree with many leaves. And two of the leaves fluttering in the wind of this story are the king and the queen. And all things are fragile, and none of us are born standing still. And time is a river, and it flows, and you can hear its sound at night when you can't sleep. And so, this king and this queen became old. And by that time, they had a son named Ivan and three daughters named Anna, Elena, and Olga. And they loved their parents dearly. But still, love cannot stop the things of this world from happening. And one day, in winter, the queen became sick. And as the snow fell, she became sicker still. And as ice filled up the branches of the trees, she became sicker still, and one day she died. Well, she was grieved by all of her children, and by the kingdom as well. And then in the spring, the king grew sick also. And one day, he called his son Ivan to his bed. And he spoke and said, "Ivan, soon I will die, and you will become king. When that happens, I wish for you to rule wisely and well. But I have a special request, a desire that I wish for you to carry out, and it is this. When it comes time for your sisters to get married, let them marry whoever they choose. Let the wild winds of their own hearts dictate who they marry. Do not try to impose your will upon them. Do not try to stand in the way, but give them your blessing." "Can you do this, my son?" "Yes, father, I can," said Ivan. And a few days later, the old king died. And he was mourned by his children, and he was mourned by that kingdom. Ripples of sorrow spread out through the pond of this story, as ripples spread out from a thrown stone. And there was weeping at that funeral, and there was the recounting of his life, just as you can look at ashes in the ground and remember the oak tree from which those ashes came, just as you can remember the acorn from which that tree grew. So, all the days of this man's life and of the life of his queen were remembered in the spring at a funeral that happened in the palace garden. And when that funeral was over, when the king and the queen had been put in the ground, when the book of their lives had been shut and put away on a high shelf, Ivan and his three sisters, Anna, Elena, and Olga, went walking in that very same palace garden. Now it was a beautiful day. A beautiful day. The clouds were high in the sky. The blossoms were on the trees. The bees were buzzing amidst those blossoms. But all of a sudden, a wind came up from far off, a harsh, cold wind. And Ivan looked At the far edge of the sky, he saw a black cloud. And this cloud came closer. And he said to his sisters, "My dear sisters, I think we should enter the castle, for a storm is coming." And the three of them looked, and they saw the black cloud approaching, and the wind grew stronger. And it made the branches of the trees thrash up and thrash down, and it pulled the blossoms from those trees and spread them in the grasses. And the wind became harsher still, and so they ran towards that castle. And there was an oak door there, and they opened that oak door, and they went inside and slammed the door behind them, and bang! Suddenly a lightning bolt came down and cracked the roof of that room into two pieces. And through that crack there came flying down, a falcon came flying down to the floor of that room. And he stomped his feet on that floor. And as he stomped those feet, he became larger and larger still, and his feathers seemed to vanish from him, and he had shoulders all of a sudden, and arms, and a human nose, and knees, and feet, and he was a young prince standing there, with a look in his eyes as of someone who can see a very long way. And there was a cloak about his shoulders of falcon feathers. And he said, "Prince Ivan, before I came to this castle as a guest, but now I come as a suitor. For I wish to marry your sister Anna, and I seek your blessing." And Ivan said, "You may have my blessing, but only if you first receive the blessing of my sister Anna. You must speak to her and to her heart. If she agrees with this, if she feels that this is a true and a beautiful thing for her to do, then yes, my blessing will go to both of you, like water raining down onto a garden. But first you must speak to her." And so the Falcon Prince and Anna went off and walked in the garden. And they walked for some time, and they talked about this and that. They shared the stories of their lives. And after a while an agreement was reached, and indeed they were married. And there was a beautiful ceremony in that same garden. And everyone came from all over the kingdom. And after that ceremony there was a great feast. And there was singing, and there was laughing, and there were bards recounting stories about the frog who lives at the center of the world. And there was good wine, and there was bread, and there were happy times and laughter, and sorrow as well. But it was wrapped in laughter, a beautiful feast. And at the end of that feast, suddenly a wind came up, and there was a flash of light, and another lightning bolt came down, bang! And they all looked up, and they saw two falcons flying away into the distant skies. And Ivan knew that his sister Anna had married the Falcon Prince and would be gone for a long while. Well, time went on as time does. Days became weeks, became months, became an entire year. Just like that, an entire year went by as if it had never happened at all. A year as brief as a hair plucked from someone's head, as brief as the life of a mouse scurrying between the grasses. So that year came and it went. And once again, on a day in spring, Ivan was walking in the palace garden with his two sisters, Elena and Olga. And it was once again a beautiful day, and the bees were buzzing amid the flowers, and the clouds were high in the sky, and they were enjoying the resplendent harmony of that moment when all of nature seemed to sing and to sing the same song. And then there came a wind, a cold, harsh wind, and Ivan looked, and across the sky he saw a black cloud coming closer. And it came closer still, and he said, "My dear sisters, I believe we should go." And the wind became harsher still, and it began to thrash the branches of the trees this way and that, and so they ran towards the castle, and the wind was harsher and harsher, and it beat the blossoms from the trees, and they opened the oak door of that castle, and ran inside, and kazang, bam, a big lightning bolt came down, and put a crack in the roof of that room. And out of that crack there came an eagle, and he landed on the floor of that room. And he stomped the floor, and as he did so he got larger and larger, a huge eagle that soon became a man, shoulders, knees, eyes, a nose, a man's hair, and there was an eagle prince standing there wearing a cloak of eagle feathers. And he said, "Prince Ivan, before I came as a guest to this castle, but today I come as a suitor, for I wish to marry your sister Elena." And Ivan said, "Eagle Prince, I will give my blessing to this union, to this wedding, to this marriage, only if Elena gives it her blessing as well. You must speak to her. You must speak to her heart and tame the wild winds of her own heart. Speak to her, my friend, and then speak to me." And so the Eagle Prince went off with Elena, and they walked in the palace garden. And the storm had passed, and they walked this way and that. They talked about this and that. They shared the stories of their lives. And finally it was agreed that they would be married. And so once again there was a beautiful ceremony in that palace garden. And after that ceremony there was a feast, and the laughter flowed like bubbling water out of a spring. And when that feast was over, there was a flash of light, and everyone looked up to see two eagles flying away, companions for life, flying away across the sky. And so all the guests went home, and time resumed its normal course. Days became weeks, became months. And all things happen in rhythms. You have a heart, you listener of this story, you have a heart. It lives by rhythm, so we live by rhythm. We wake, we sleep, we speak, and we are silent. All these things happen in rhythms, rhythms like a drum, rhythms like the seasons returning. And so in a year passed, a year that had gone by as if it had never been. And once again, Ivan was walking in the palace garden with his dear sister Olga. And once again, they were walking around, and they saw there was a sundial there in that garden, and they were looking at the shadows, the precise and beautiful shadows of that sundial. And then suddenly a cloud came before the sun, and the sundial could no longer be read correctly, and they looked far off, and there was another black cloud arriving. And Ivan said, "My dear sister, let us go, hurry back to the castle." So they ran through the garden. The winds began to shriek and thrash the trees this way and that. The blossoms fell from the trees. They opened that oak door. They ran inside, and kabang! Just like that, another lightning bolt came down and put a crack in that ceiling. And a raven flew down to the floor of that room and stomped the floor. Bang! Just like that, and got larger and larger and became a human with shoulders, with eyes that could see very far. A human, a raven prince, standing there with a cloak of raven feathers. And he spoke in a charcoal, beautiful voice, beautiful as silky black water flowing across the sky at night. He said, "Ivan, before I came as a guest, but now I come as a suitor. For I wish to marry your dear sister Olga. Will you give me your blessing?" And Ivan said, "My blessing I will give, but only after Olga herself has agreed to this. Only after the waters of her heart have flowed together with yours, and the two of you have made a joint decision. You must speak with her, my friend." So the Raven Prince took Olga's hand, and the two of them walked through the palace garden, sharing the beauty of that moment, and telling each other the stories of their lives. And after some time, they too came to an agreement like two rivers flowing together to become one river. And there was a wedding in that garden, and the two of them were married, and there was a feast. And in the middle of that feast, when it was at its height, when the most craziest jokes were being told, there was a jolt of fire out of the sky and a blinding flash, and they all looked up, and they saw two ravens flying away into the deeps of the sky. And so the weddings of Ivan's three sisters were celebrated. And time continued to move forward. Days became weeks, and once again a year went by as if it had never been. It was spring once again. Ivan was in that castle. He was king, but he was a bit lonely. Things seemed a little empty without his sisters there. And so on a certain day he said, "I will go visit my sisters and see how they are doing." So he called for a good strong horse. He got on that horse, and off he went. And he galloped through his kingdom, and then outside of his kingdom, across swamps, across fields where the grasses whisper in the moonlight, through forests where the lichen speaks on the trees in an old blue and green language. He galloped for a long way, searching for his three sisters. And then one day, he galloped through a forest and came out into a wide, wide field. And he looked into that field, and it was strewn with soldiers, dead and dying soldiers, burning wagons, dead horses in all directions. Clearly a great and fierce battle had been fought in that field. And Ivan stopped his horse, and he looked around him in wonderment and in sorrow. And he said, "If anyone is left alive, tell me, who has slain this army? Who has beaten this army?" And one man, wounded beside a tree in a purple cloak, he said, "Traveler, Maria Morevna, the beautiful warrior queen, She has conquered this army." And the man closed his eyes and slept. And Ivan got back on his horse, and he galloped across that wide field strewn with soldiers, and he came to a white tent. And outside of that white tent there was a tall, queen-like woman. She was dressed in purple and red and gold. She had a beautiful sword at her side. She had a red hat on. The smoke from her campfire was before her, blowing in the wind. And he approached her, and she said, "Traveler, young prince, do you come of your own desire, or has someone sent you?" And he said, "I come here of my own desire, for all true princes ride the horses of their own desire, and they ride them very well." And then she said, "Would you like to have tea?" So the two of them had tea in her white tent, and they fell to talking and telling the stories of their lives, and they shared this and that. They shared the beautiful parts of their lives and the dark, sorrowful parts as well. And their two stories became one story as they spoke together in that tent, and it was decided that soon they would be married. So the two of them, Prince Ivan and Maria Morevna, the warrior queen, went off away from that white tent and that battlefield to her castle. A beautiful castle. It was orange and red. It seemed to be made out of stones that were in fact old sunsets that had been made into stones themselves and locked together in this beautiful shape, a red and orange castle, like a permanent sunset there on a high hill. And in the garden of that castle, the two of them were married. The beautiful words were said, binding the two of them together, like two threads in a tapestry much larger than anything either of them had imagined ever before. And time went on, and they were happy there, the two of them together, happy in that beautiful castle. And then one day, Maria said, "Ivan, I must go off to fight a battle. It's something I do from time to time. So I'm going to leave with my army. I want you to stay here in this castle and look after this castle. That is my desire. Can you do that?" He said, "Yes, my queen. I will stay here and look after the castle. You go and fight your battle." "Wonderful," she said. "But there is one thing you should know, one small thing you should know about this castle. There's a door on the second floor, a green door at the end of a long hallway. You can do anything you want in this castle, but do not open that door. Can you do that?" "Yes, my dear," he said. "I will not open that door." And they kissed each other goodbye, and Maria Morevna galloped off on her horse with all her soldiers and her army around her. Off they went to their battle, and Ivan was left behind in the castle. Now, how long do you think it took? It's easy for us to say, outside of the story as we are, it's easy for us to say, "Oh, don't open that door." You know how it is. There's a door, you're told not to open it. Do you open that door or not? It's one of the most crucial, exciting, and snarly questions this life has to offer to us. Did he open that door, or did he not? If you or I were in that story, would we open that door? Well, perhaps we are in that story now. Perhaps we have already opened that door. Already we have. And we are sitting here with that guilt all through our body, like a fine wine we drunk 3 lives ago. Perhaps we have opened that door. Well, in this story, Ivan wastes no time at all. He waits hardly at all. He goes up to the second floor just to look at that door, he tells myself. What's this about a door? I gotta see this door at least so I know what I'm dealing with. He goes down the hallway. There it is. It's a green door, just like she said. There's an orange symbol of a horse painted on that door. Interesting. It has a doorknob. It's gold. It's a castle after all. A green door. And then he thinks for himself for a moment, should I open this door or not? And then, without really thinking about it too much at all, his hand reaches out, takes hold of that doorknob, turns that doorknob, and he opens the door. And he looks inside, and he sees there's a man in there. A man, yes, a pale white man. It is Koschei the Deathless, dressed in a black coat with the collar up. He's there. He's got a pale look on his face, and there's 12 chains wrapped around his body, silver chains that sparkle. And Koschei the Deathless says, "Young prince, Ivan, I'm very thirsty. I've been here for 2 years, held prisoner by Maria Morevna. Please, if there is any compassion in your heart, if there is any part of you that is like the dove or the sweet stream that flows through the forests, providing nourishment to all travelers. If there's any part of you which is compassionate, please bring me a keg of water." Ivan looked at him, and he said, sure, okay, yeah. And he went down the hallway. He got a keg of water, and he returned. And he gave it to Koschei the Deathless. And he lifted up that keg of water, and he drank it down. "Oh, that is good." He drank the entire keg down. "Ah," he said. He was all shriveled up, Koschei was. He looked very dry, it's true. And he said, Ivan, please, I'm still thirsty. Can you please get for me a second keg of water? If there is any compassion in your body, in your toenail, in your heart, in your smallest eyelid, if there's any mercy in you, please bring me a second keg of water." And Ivan went down the hallway, and he brought Koschei the Deathless a second keg of water. And Koschei thanked him and lifted it up, and he drank it all down like a waterfall pouring into his dry body. "Oh, that is so good." He drank it all down. And then he said, "Ivan, please, I am still very, very thirsty. My body is like a desert. Please bring the third keg of water. Please just bring me one third keg of water, and I will thank you in many ways." So Ivan agreed, and he went down the hallway, got a third keg of water, and brought it to Koschei the Deathless. And he drank it down ravenously. He drank it down. Glug, 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 glug. Bah! And then he flexed his muscles, and all the 12 chains shattered and flew in fragments to the corners of the room. Bang! Just like that. And he looked at Ivan, and he said, "Ivan, thank you for bringing me water. And now you will never see your dear lady, Maria Morevna, ever again." And bang, just like that, he turned into a green cloud of smoke, and he flew out of that closet and down the hallway. Ivan turned, and panic-stricken, he ran down the hallway in pursuit. Up some stairs the green cloud went, and then out a high window, bang, into the air. Ivan ran up to the heights of that castle. He came to a tower. He opened a door, went out to the balcony of that tower, and he looked far off. There was a wide field there. He could see Maria Morevna on a white horse, with a flag galloping at the head of her army, and all her soldiers were behind her. And as he watched, the green cloud of smoke that was Koschei the Deathless went traveling fast, flashing through the air, and it descended upon Maria Morevna. Like a great hand, hungry, it descended over her horse, and nothing could be seen but the green whirling cloud. And then that cloud went up into the sky, and the horse was still there, but Maria Morevna was not on that horse. And the horse, confused and panicked, began to go in a circle this way and that. Where was Maria Morevna? And the green cloud shot up into the sky and off and into the farthest reaches of this world and was gone. And Ivan ran down to the bottom of the castle. And as he did so, at the front gate, the soldiers were coming back. They were panicked as well. They didn't know what was going on. Some of them were angry, frustrated. "Maria Morevna is gone," they cried. "She's gone." "Yes," said Ivan, "and Maria Morevna is gone. Koschei the Deathless has stolen her away. Bring me your fastest horse." And they went, and they got their fastest horse, and they brought it to Ivan. And he jumped on the back of that horse, and he said, "I am going to retrieve Maria Morevna. I will be back soon." And off he went. And he galloped away from that castle, and through the foothills of this world, through the swamps and the marshes of this world, through the fields where the wind comes whispering through the grasses. But he did not know where to find the castle of Koschei the Deathless. He had no idea. He was filled with fire, but that fire had nowhere to go. He looked this way and that way. He asked around. Nobody knew where her castle was. And finally, one day, he came to an oak tree. And in this oak tree there was a falcon. And as he watched, this falcon came down from the tree and stomped the ground and turned into the Falcon Prince. And there he stood with a cloak of falcon feathers, and he said, "Ivan, what brings you here?" And Ivan said, "I am here seeking the love of my heart, Maria Morevna, for she has been stolen away by Koschei the Deathless. I am seeking his castle, but I do not know where to look." And the Falcon Prince waved his arms, and it was like a special cloud which no one had seen went away with the wind, and there was the castle of the Falcon Prince and Princess Anna. And he said, "Welcome to our house. Welcome to our palace. Come, be with us for a while. We will try to figure this thing out." So Ivan stayed with the Falcon Prince and with his sister Anna for about 3 days. And he ate the good food there, and they talked about where possibly he might find the castle of Koshchei the Deathless. And finally, after 3 days, Ivan said, "Now I must go. High or low, I must seek everywhere. I must find her, for she is the love of my heart, and my life is nothing without her." And they said, "Very good, but leave us some token of yourself, so we may remember you, if perhaps you do not return." And Ivan pulled a knife from his pocket, a knife like you would eat with, a dinner knife, some silverware, and he said, "Here, take my knife, keep this, and I swear to you I will return." And so he turned, got on his horse, and went away. And he galloped across the fields and hills of this world. And the winds blew this way and that, and the marshes burbled, and the flowers grew in the fields. He looked for a long time or a short time. Could have been days, could have been years. He wandered, seeking everywhere he could think to seek. And then one day he came to a large oak tree, and in that oak tree there was an eagle. And yes, indeed, as all things return, as silence comes back like a chorus of a song, as the waves beat against the shore in their own patterns and their rhythms, so this story has a rhythm. And in this rhythm we are engaged, in this rhythm we are involved, we are dwelling in this rhythm. And that eagle spoke and said, "Ivan, what brings you here?" And Ivan said, "I am seeking Maria Morevna, the beautiful queen and the love of my heart." And just then the eagle flew down from that tree and stomped the ground and became the Eagle Prince, standing there with a cloak of eagle feathers. And he said, "Ivan, come, stay with me in my palace, with your dear sister Elena. We will nourish your heart and your mind and your body as well, and we will try to figure this thing out." So he spent some time with his brother-in-law, the Eagle Prince, and with his sister Elena. And he ate and he drank with them, and they laughed and they sang. And after 3 days he said, "Now I must leave you and find Maria Morevna, the dear love of my heart." And they said, "Yes, very well, but leave us something to remember you by, in case you do not return." And he took a fork from his pocket, a silver fork, and he said, "Here, keep this to remember me by." And so off he went on his horse once again. And he traveled a long way or a short way. Far and wide he went over this world. And finally, as you might have guessed, he came to an oak tree, and in that oak tree there was a raven. And the raven came down and stomped on the ground and became a young prince, dressed in a cloak of raven feathers. And with his dark eyes that could see far and away through this world, he said, "Ivan, what brings you here?" And Ivan said, "I am seeking Maria Morevna, the love of my heart, who was stolen away by Koshchei the Deathless." "Ah, I see," said the raven. "Well, come stay with me and your sister Olga, and we will nourish your body and your soul and find a way to solve this thing." So he stayed with them, and they talked about where the castle might be of Koshchei the Deathless. And after 3 days he prepared to go. And his sister said, "My dear brother, please leave us some token of yourself, so that if you do not return, we may remember you in some way." And he said, "Yes, indeed, here." And he pulled a spoon from his pocket, a silver spoon. And he said, "Keep this to remember me by." And then he got on his horse and galloped away into the wide distances of this world. And he traveled for a long way or a short way. Well, a long way or a short way, but we will say, in fact, it was a long way. It was a very long way. Days, months seemed to go by, a long time. Finally, he ascended into the heights of this world, the Rocky Mountains, and it was there he found the castle of Koshchei the Deathless. A castle made of black and purple stone, a castle like a great bat roosting at the heights of this world, surrounded by granite and quartz, beautiful stones. And he arrived at that castle, and he was lucky, Ivan was. Koshchei was out hunting, but Maria Morevna was there, in the palace garden. And And she said, "Oh, Ivan, I'm so glad to see you." And they embraced and they cried tears of joy. And he said, "Yes, my dear. And now let us run away from this place. Let us get you away from Koschei the Deathless." And she got on his horse, and away they went. And they rode down from those high mountains into the foothills, and away from those foothills through the marshes and swamps and the windy forests of this world. But before long, Koschei the Deathless returned to his castle. And as he was returning, his horse, which was a magical and beautiful horse, stumbled on a stone. And Koschei said, "My dear horse, why do you stumble? Is there a small pebble beneath you, or is there trouble at home?" And the horse said, "My friend, there is trouble at home. For Ivan has come and stolen away Maria Morevna." "Oh, curse him," said Koschei. "But are we in a hurry or not? How long have we got to catch up with them?" And the horse said, "Koschei, we could plant grain. We could wait for that grain to flourish in the field. We could harvest that grain. We could grind it up and make flour. We could then make bread from that grain. We could make 5 ovenfuls of bread from that flour. And then we could eat that bread and have a good long sleep, and still we would be able to catch them." "Wonderful," said Koschei. So, after a while, after time had passed and they had rested, and indeed after Koschei had made all that bread, indeed they set out after Ivan. And they galloped as quick as thought out of those mountains and across the hills and through the swamps and the forests of this world. And soon, just like that, he was immediately there, beside Ivan on his horse. And then Koschei spoke and said, "Ivan, I will be merciful to you this time, for you were kind to me when I was in the castle of Maria Morevna. I remember that. And I will be kind to you on one further occasion. But the third time that you cross me, I will cut you into little pieces." And then he took hold of Maria Morevna and put him on back of his horse, and he turned and he galloped away. Well, Ivan sorrowed and grieved for some time. But before long he set out once again for that castle. And he galloped up into the heights of this world, and there was that castle once again, made of purple and black rock, roosting like a bat at the top of the world. And he was lucky once again. Koschei was away, and Maria Morevna was there in the garden. And he said, "Maria, come, get on my horse, let us go." And she embraced him, and they cried tears of joy. And she said, "But Ivan, Koschei will catch us, and he will not be merciful every single time, no, no." And Ivan said, "What does it matter? At least the two of us will spend a few hours together." And so she got on his horse, and away they galloped, down from those high mountains, through the hills, through the fields of this world. But before long, Koschei returned. And as he returned to his castle, his magical and powerful horse stumbled on a stone. And Koschei said, "My dear horse, why do you stumble? Is it because there is a stone in the path here, or is there trouble at home?" And his horse spoke and said, "Koschei, there is trouble at home. For Prince Ivan has stolen away Maria Morevna once again." "Tell me," said Koschei, "must we hurry? Or in fact, shall we be able to catch them with very little trouble?" And the horse said, "Koschei, we could plant barley and wait for that barley to flourish in the field. And then we could make beer out of that barley. We could drink ourselves silly and then sleep it off until we are completely recovered. And then we could set out in pursuit, and still we would catch them." "Wonderful," said Koschei. So in fact, he did plant barley and harvest it and brew beer and sleep it off. And then he set out in pursuit. And as quick as thought, that horse traveled. And just like that, bang, he was immediately beside Ivan and Maria on their horse. And Koschei said, "Ivan, I will be merciful to you this time as well. because you were merciful to me when I was thirsty in the castle of Maria Morevna. But the third time that you cross me, I will cut you into little pieces." And with that, he grabbed hold of Maria Morevna, put her on his horse, turned, and galloped away. So Ivan was left in the dust of Koschei's galloping away. And he sorrowed for a time, but then, once again, he set out for that high castle at the top of the world. A castle made of purple and black rock, surrounded by quartz and granite. A castle like the low notes of the piano. A castle like the snarl of a raccoon in the darkest midnight of the year. And he galloped up to that castle, and once again he was lucky. For Koschei the Deathless was away, he was hunting. But Maria was there in the palace garden, and he spoke to her and said, "Maria, come, let us go." And she embraced him, and they both cried tears of joy. And she said, "Ivan, you know, if Koschei catches you this time, he will not be merciful." "What does it matter?" said Ivan. "If I am cut into little pieces, what does it matter? Still, the two of us will be together for a few hours." So the two of them got onto his horse, and they rode down out of those mountains and into the foothills and into the meadows where the wind runs like an invisible river through the grasses. But far away, Koschei was returning to his castle on his magical horse. And his horse stumbled, and he said, "My dear horse, why do you stumble? Is there a stone in the path, or is there trouble at home?" And the horse said, "Koschei, there is trouble at home. For once again, Prince Ivan has stolen away your dear Maria Morevna." "Tell me," said Koschei, "must we hurry?" And the horse said, "Koschei, we could plant apple trees and wait for them to flourish and to blossom. And then we could wait for those blossoms to become sweet fruits. And then we could harvest those apples, and we could make cider out of those apples. Drink ourselves silly on that cider, sleep for a long time, and then set out in pursuit, and still we would catch them." So Koschei did that, and they set out in pursuit. And that horse was as fast as thought itself. So he galloped down out of the mountains, and before long he was right there beside Ivan and Maria on their horse. And Koschei said, "Ivan, I was kind to you on 2 occasions, because you were kind to me when I was prisoner of Maria Morevna in her palace. But now I will show you no mercy." And he pulled out his sword, and he cut Ivan into little pieces. And he took those little pieces, and he put them into a barrel. And he covered that barrel with tar, and he reinforced it with iron. And then, with Maria Morevna on the back of his horse, he galloped to the edge of the sea, and he cast that barrel into the sea. And the roaring waves of that wild and shattering sea took that barrel and swept it out into the depths of that ocean. And then Koschei turned and galloped back to his castle with Maria Morevna on the back of his horse. And at that moment, the spoon, the knife, and the fork, which had been owned by Prince Ivan, and which had been given to his 3 dear sisters, that spoon, that knife, and that fork, at the same time as the sisters were looking at them, so it happened, all 3 of those pieces of magical cutlery turned black as coal. And the 3 sisters looked at them and said, "Uh-oh." Thanks for listening to this story. Thanks for awakening this story. Storytelling is best, of course, live in person when the storyteller and the audience are breathing the same air in the same place. But it exists in many ways. It exists in books, in movies, of course, in songs, in poems. A story goes on. It is in our lives like a constant river. So even here, online as we are, thank you for awakening this story and making it happen. It does not exist without me and you, without the listener and the teller. And perhaps I am a listener in some way, and you are a teller of stories in some way you do not know. Check this story out. This is a Russian story, and it's pretty great, like a magical ceremony, perhaps, or something like that. Check out the repetition in this thing, right? I mean, we're used to fairy tales like the Grimm's fairy tales, excuse me, where things happen 3 times, and that happens in this, but it happens a lot. It can be a little relentless, maybe, but it's like a dance. Things have to be done over and over again. It's like a recipe where you have to put in 3 tablespoons of this and 3 teaspoons of that, or else you don't get the right result. You don't get the bread baked as you want it. And many of these stories are shamanic at their roots, shamans. So the folks who would be the lawyers, the spiritual lawyers between the human society and the wild. And not just the wild, but the other world, the spirits. And so the spirits of nature and ourselves, the dead, all those unseen forces. A shaman is a person who negotiates the relationship between what is seen and what is unseen. And in a story like this, there are traces of those beliefs. In fact, it might be the bedrock. It might be the first origin of this particular story. There's a problem, and we're going to solve it. But let's not stay with the satellite view. Let's get down into this story a little bit. I would invite you to do that. Go into this story. As for me, I don't know. I liked this story right away when I came across it in a book of Russian fairy tales, if we can use that word. And I like Koschei the Deathless there in the closet. Just bang. I mean, that kind of thing happens in other stories, but there he is. Who knew? Maria Morevna, the warrior queen, was keeping this guy in the closet. A guy who is deathless. Koschei the Deathless. He has no death. It's great. So something about that I like. If you're in a relationship with someone, well, we all are in some way, even if it's our dog, our parents, the world, the earth, you start to see the shadow side. There's something in the closet. In romantic or long-term relationship, after a while, you see the thing you didn't want to see. And you open that thing yourself. What does that mean? I don't know. You decide to bet on that first kiss, that first date, that marriage. You decide to commit. Something in your soul leaps at the chance and jumps into the river of connection between you and another person. And that river takes you to some weird and troublesome places, some uncomfortable places. And I think what it is the soul of the self, this thing, this being, this animal you are, wants to grow, wants to increase its awareness, wants to widen its consciousness, you could say, wants to shed light on things. If we see light as consciousness and the darkness as what we don't know, Koschei is in the closet. He's in the dark. He's hidden. And there's a desire in us to open those places and see what's in there. It's a completely natural desire. It's perhaps the most fundamental desire. Crocuses coming out of the dark earth, right? It's the desire to be more conscious, more awake, more aware. It's the desire to grow. So it's easy to say, don't open that door, buddy. But in fact, opening those doors is how we grow, because it lands us in the beautiful trouble. And Ivan in this story gets some beautiful trouble, as we shall see, as we have seen. He's in pieces, for gosh sakes. The beautiful trouble, which is bound up with relationship. So it's a beautiful thing, really, to open that door, no matter what you see in there, and a courageous thing to open that door. How many doors in our lives have we not opened? How many doors? That's the painful thing. We see the trouble afterwards, and it's trouble for sure. But not to open that door is perhaps a deeper and more stagnant trouble. It's a kind of death. It's not to grow, it's to stop moving. And who wants that? Who wants that? Also in this story, we have the three sisters early on married to birds. Well, not to birds exactly, because they're more than birds. They're married to otherworld spirits. They arrive in a thundercloud and a great wind. They make the castle ceiling break open, and they arrive as birds. The container of that castle cannot hold what it is they have to bring to the situation. They are bringing something larger than castles. The castle is not up to the task of containing them, right? They cannot be contained by the structure. They come in, wham, the ceiling, crack in the ceiling. Now, of course, they have to get in too, but there's a sense there of something shattered once again in a ceremony. And then the three sisters are married to these bird spirits who whisk them away. In many ways, I think this whole story, if it's about anything, it's about these weavings between the seen and the unseen, the human world and the realm of the spirits, the magic, the other world, all of those things. And this story, if the story wants something, you could say it wants to knit those two things together more tightly, which is the desire, if you can put it that way, well, let's put it that way, which is the desire of many stories. We go about the world with our receipts and our smartphones and our cars and our shoes, forgetting that there is an unseen world. There's a magical world out there which supports and nourishes everything we are and everything we know. And this world, in fact, has come from that world. That would be the shamanic way of understanding it. We forget we are the beautiful amnesiacs, as the shaman Martin Prechtel has said. We forget our relationship with the spirits and must be reminded through trouble. So perhaps we can take the teachings of this story to heart. Perhaps we can believe in them for at least a moment. I invite you, listening to this story, to put some breath into your hands. Just blow it into your hands and then offer it up to the source of this story, whatever it is, this mysterious source. This story, which, like I said, comes from Russia, but is most likely pretty darn old. Could be thousands of years old. For real. A long time. They did some studious investigation of European fairy tales like Sleeping Beauty, using language analysis and stuff like that. And those are some of the numbers they came up with. Some of the most basic of the fairy tales they think are about 7,000 years old, based on the languages that they find them in, and they all go back to a common source in Indo-European, which was the language before Sanskrit and ancient Greek and everything else before Latin, that all of those languages come from, which is another story. But needless to say, I invite you to offer something up to this story, either your breath or go give it a flower or something. Find a place in the forest and give this story a stone or some words or a piece of fluff you found that is beautiful to you. If you do so, it will deepen your relationship with this story. If you treat it like an animal, like a being who has agency, who seeks us out, the way a cat might look for a place on the porch in the sun, it has agency. If you treat the story like that, it's a good way to relate to story. And it might even be true. So may we all be in good relationship with the unseen. May we all, it's dangerous to invoke this, but may we all open the doors we are supposed to open, the doors which help us to grow and land us into the fierce and beautiful trouble by which we will become more than we currently are. That is my wish for all of us. Thank you for listening to this story. If you're able to support the podcast, please do so. My website is jayleeming.com. Web as in connected, web as in spiders, web as in linking things together. That's what it's all about. We link, we are connected. jayleeming.com is the website. And there is a part 2 to this story. Gosh, we're going to get Ivan out of here. He's in pieces now. Who among us has not been in pieces? but he is in pieces now, and we're going to rectify that. If you can just find your way to part 2 of this story, which should be hopefully right before your eyes. Thanks again, and take care. that Scheherazade should be killed. And once again her father, the vizier, gave thanks that she was alive for another day. All right, well, now we're deep in it, aren't we? Now we're deep in the world.